Good morning. This is the Keeping It Real Sunday School class from Cornerstone Baptist Church in Richland, Missouri. I'm Dr. Max Thornsberry and I'm the teacher, and my wife Brenda will be reading the scriptures today out of the Authorized Version, the original King James Version of the Bible. We're going to have an unusual lesson today. We've been studying about great men in the Bible, David. We've been studying about Jonathan. Today we're going to study about an unbeliever, Haman, in the time of Esther. Now, this is a complicated story, and I can't have time this morning to go over the entire book of Esther, which is what I really need to do for you to gather the whole meaning of this. But we're going to start in chapter 3, reading some verses here about Haman, and you'll be able to come to an understanding of what kind of man he was. Remember that Haman is an Agagite, and we'll discuss that in a minute, what that really means. So Brenda, if you'll start in Esther chapter 3 and read verses 1 through 5.
After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and the Agagite. My goodness, I should have read this before. And advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him, and all the king's servants who were in the king's gate bowed and did
reverence. We're gonna use the word reverence.
Yeah.
Use the word reverenced.
Reverence to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did reverence to him. Then the king's servants who were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandments? Now it came to pass, when they had spoken daily unto him, that he hearkened not unto them. And that they told to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath.
We've got to understand, as we look back here at a lesson not too long ago about Moses and Ben-Hur's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, and Joshua, remember, holding up Moses' hands?
Yes.
You remember that the Amalekites had come against the Israelite nation as they were moving through the wilderness, and they attacked the hind parts of their column and did damage and killed, and old people, lame people, children, people that were at the back end of this huge column of people going through the wilderness. And God had told Moses to go down and whip up on the Amalekites. They were demon-worshiping savages. We discussed it in great detail. Later, about 400 years, God has directed King Saul to wipe out the Amalekites completely. Every man, woman, and child, and all the livestock and everything that they have, take nothing from them. It's all dedicated to the devil anyway. You don't want it. Well, Saul didn't do it. Mm-hmm. Saul kept the best of the livestock, said he's going to sacrifice them to God, and Samuel told him that obedience was better than sacrifice. And he did a terrible thing. He kept the king, Agag, alive. Mm-hmm. Now he brought Agag into his palace, historians say, and treated him with great honor because he was the king of the Amalekites. And evidently Agag was able to have relations with some chambermaid or something, and the line of the Amalekites continued. Mm-hmm. And we see it here now in Esther in the form of Haman. Now, Haman was an Agagite, meaning he was a descendant of Agag the king. And somehow, some of these older historians, Herodias and Josephus, tell us that is how that line kept alive, because Saul didn't obey God. Mm-hmm. You'll also remember that because he didn't obey God, at that point God removed his anointing from Saul and instructed Samuel to anoint David as king, which he did. So here we are, centuries later. I think if you look at time period, we're about 400 years after the time of King Saul not killing Agag. And whatever happened to Agag, do you remember, Brenda?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Well, when Samuel found out that Saul had kept Agag, he had him brought before him, and he killed him and chopped him up with a sword into little tiny pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But he did not know that there was a chambermaid that had slept with Agag and that the lineage continued. Now, these are demon-worshiping savages. Haman is no different. He is not a godly man. I'm not sure why he's in this group of lessons. But he has been appointed, obviously an intelligent person, conniving person, and he's been appointed prime minister over Persia. I hate to get into all of this drawn-out history to you, but you got to know a little bit about what goes on here. Sometimes this man is called Artaxerxes II. He's later called Xerxes in Greek. And that his dad, who was Darius, now the problem is when you go back and look at this term Darius, it's used for a number of men. Mm-hmm. And so this Darius is often called Artaxerxes I. Well, Artaxerxes I conducted a huge war against Greece. Their empire was phenomenal in size. I think there were 127 provinces, one of which was Israel. It stretched all the way to Egypt, it says, from Ethiopia, which is way down in Africa, past Egypt, all the way to India. And north and south, it ran all the way down into the Sinai Peninsula, all the way up into part of Europe. They had conquered part of Macedonia and Macedon, and which we call Macedonia, and whole bunches of southern part of Europe. So this is a huge, huge empire. Well, some of these Greek city-states up there had rebelled against them, so this Darius, this Xerxes' dad, what we would see in the Bible sometimes called Artaxerxes I, waged war, and he lost. He died, and then this Artaxerxes II, which is called Xerxes, or as you're reading it, how does it pronounce? Aharis? It's hard to keep all of these dadgum kings straight, but I think I've got it right for you. He decides to continue what his dad did, and he goes up in there and does battle. He wins some battles. That's where we end up with the great story of the Marathon and the Spartan 300. Well, Greek lost that. Persia went all the way up into Greece and sacked Athens and took over all of Greece. But eventually, Greece raised a great navy and whipped them. These city-states got back together, and Leonidas with the Spartans had been killed at Marathon, at Thermopylae. And so they eventually beat him back. And he came back to his big palace. I guess this was the most phenomenal thing in the earth at that time. And they have excavated this palace. It wasn't in Babylon. These are Persians, not Babylonians. They'd already conquered Babylon in Daniel's time. Now, a lot of people don't remember, but the Jewish nation had been scattered all up and down the Tigris and Euphrates River, from the northern kingdom first, and now the southern kingdom. But only 50,000 Jews actually went back to Jerusalem with Ezra and Nehemiah. And these are the Jews of the line that we're interested in, which is Judah and Benjamin, because it's from the line of the tribe of Judah that Jesus is going to become. Mm-hmm. But all these other tribes are left over here strung out all up and down Persia. Of course, everywhere they go, the Jews end up in administration. They end up in the merchant class. They're all highly educated for the time. And they were scattered in all these provinces, including Israel. And they were doing the work that they needed to do. Well, Haman comes along, and he devises a plan. When he finds out that Mordecai is a Jew, he's going to devise a plan, and Mordecai is Esther's uncle, devise a plan to eliminate all the Jews in all the provinces. In other words, he was going to destroy the Jewish nation. Mm-hmm. You understand, the devil had this in mind, to destroy the line of Jesus. And Esther and Mordecai, and they think millions of Jews were in all of these provinces. They think this falls in the latter part of the book of Ezra, between, I think, chapters 6 and 7, that this event occurred. But they're way over here in Shushan and Susa, And that's a long way from Babylon and a long way from Jerusalem. But they have elected to stay. They're not of the lineage of Christ, you understand? Mm-hmm. And they've elected to stay. Well, during this process, he has come back from this big he had a 180-day feast trying to gin up, as we say today, support for going to war against Greece. And during that time, he had a big feast, and he wanted Vashti, his wife, who I guess was one of, Elizabeth Taylor type person, just absolutely beautiful beyond imagination. He wanted her to come out, present herself to all these men that are half drunk. She refused to do it, so he moved her from the kingship. And so now they're going to prepare all these eunuchs that are in charge. You know what a eunuch is, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Don't even go.
Great big people. Great big guard type people. I mean, they got 7 foot tall. They never quit growing. And like a castrated steer, if you keep him around till he's 6 or 7 or 8 years old, you can't look over his back. He never quits growing. So that tells you what a eunuch is in a certain manner. Well, this eunuchs had taken great interest in Esther, and one of them loved her and took care of her and developed her. And so after he comes back from getting himself whipped up there in Greece, he takes interest in his harem and decides that he wants a new king. And Esther's being prepared, or a new queen, excuse me. It wasn't that time of day. Get a new queen, and so Esther comes along, and eventually she becomes queen. So Haman, in all of this process, has been appointed prime minister, which is the highest position in the land next to the king. And so I want you to go back, because I want to set this up, go back to Esther chapter 2 and read 19 through 23 so that you can see that Mordecai was a very faithful servant of the king as a Jewish man, a very intelligent person, a very authoritative person. I think it says that he sat at the gates of the king 11 times in the book of Esther. What that means is he was a high administrative official in the kingdom. So Esther 2, 19 through 23.
And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet revealed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, just as when she was brought up with him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those who kept the door, were angry and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther informed the king of it in Mordecai's name. And when inquiry was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it is written in the book of Chronicles before the king.
Now, there's not any evidence that the king was aware of this. You understand?
Yes.
Later on, when the king can't sleep, he asks the people who are in charge of the records to come in and just read him some of the records and chronicles of the nation, and lo and behold, he reads him this. Mm-hmm. That's when Haman had prepared a gallows for Mordecai, and the king brings Haman in, and he says, how would you go about recognizing a man that has great significance for the king? And so Haman thinks he's talking about him. Mm-hmm. So he says, we could put the king's robe on him. We can put him on the king's horse with the king's saddle. And I'd say we'd parade him through the town and proclaim what great things he had done for the king. And the king says, oh, good, go get Mordecai and let's do that. And you be the one that goes in front of him. This man that Haman has tried to get killed and set up this, you're going to read here in just a minute that Haman was a conniver and a cheater and a liar, and the truth was not in him. Esther 3, 6 through 9.
And he disdains to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had made known to him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar.
Now let me stop you right there just a minute. It was common in these pagan cultures to, throw the bones out and try to ascertain what the gods are going to do. And that process of doing that, this pagan process of trying to cast lots before these idolatrous gods that they worshiped, the so-called little g gods, was this casting lots. And so this is in the first month of the year, and Haman is casting these lots, and he determines that this should not be done until the 12th month. In other words, the gods have spoken, right? Mm-hmm. The gods have spoken, and this thing I'm going to do to destroy all the Jews is not going to happen at the 12th month, and this is the first month. So he gets the Jews, Mordecai, Esther, and the Jews get 11 months. Now the thought here is that God has arranged this way. Would you turn to Proverbs 16 and read? Let me see if I can find this here. I think I want you to read verse 18. Read that and let me see what it is. Maybe it's 33.
Pride goeth...
No, it's be 33. We'll read that one in a little bit.
The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord.
So what King Solomon is writing here is that you can cast lots to determine something, but God has his hand in it. Mm-hmm. And the principle here is that this concept of casting lots in Persian was called pur, P-U-R. That could be pronounced P, po, or pur. I don't know, I don't speak Persian, so I wouldn't have no idea. In any case, this celebration of Esther overcoming Haman has been called Purim, P-U-R-I-U-M, and the Jews celebrate that today in March. They have a three-sided pastry because Haman wore a three-sided hat, a three-pointed hat, kind of like a colonial hat. Mm-hmm. And then they put inside these pastries poppy seeds because Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were all eunuchs, made into eunuchs, ate seeds and stuff like that instead of partaking of the king's table. And they put something sweet in there, and that's their celebration of Purim. Poem, I'm going to say Purim. And they celebrate it every year. And it was first celebrated, we think, during the Maccabean Revolt, which occurred right after Alexander the Great had died and divided up his kingdom. The king that was the general that was in charge up there in the northern part, like Syria and Damascus and all that, he decided he's going to wipe out temple worship and wipe out Jewish culture. And the Maccabean Revolt beat him back. And part of that celebration was celebrating this Purim. It happens every year, Brendan. It's a big deal. And they have these three-pointed pastries because Haman wore a three-pointed hat. How about that? I'll be darned. Okay.
I'm not sleeping.
Anyway, you can see what happened here. He's casting lots before these pagan gods, attempting to determine what month he wants to wipe out the Jews. And he's casting them. It would be for us like the month of January, although it wasn't. And the lots say don't do anything up to December. So that gives all this time for God to work his plan, and that God's in charge of that. I don't know that you could say that. I don't think you can throw dice and say God's in charge of you winning or not winning. But that's what the point is being made here. All right, read on.
And Haman said unto the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are different from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those who have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries.
Now what they're going to bring into the king's treasuries is what all these people own. Mm-hmm. Do you understand that? Mm-hmm. I looked this up. 10,000 talents of silver. We don't measure in that way again, but it's about equal to 370 or 380 tons of pure silver. Now that's a lot of silver.
That's a lot of silver.
That's a lot of silver. You make a lot of computers with that. And so you can see that God's hand is here. Esther has not told the king that she's a Jew, because Mordecai said, keep it to yourself. Now he's going to find out at the banquet that Esther's going to throw. But at this point in time, he's made this decree. He goes along with Haman, and Haman's getting everything set up for 11 months later in December to have all these people killed, and he's going to send letters. He did send letters, sent out letters and proclamations all across this huge empire to all these 127 provinces that on such and such a day in December you're going to fall on the Jews, and we're going to give all of their possessions to the king. So he's going to spend 10,000 talents, probably not a dime of his own money, and it's going to return to the king, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold, because of what these people own. They're Jewish merchants. They own property. They own valuable things. And the king has signed this decree. He has not told him who they are.
No.
He just told him that they're a group of people that have their own laws. Well, Mordecai is not going to bow down to Haman. Why?
Because he's Jewish. Because
I'm the Lord thy God. I am a jealous
yeah.
God. Don't have any other gods before
Right.
me. You don't honor somebody. And these people were bowing down on their hands and putting their face to the ground like that. This isn't an Oriental to bow in respect to someone when you meet them or shake their hand. Now, this was obeisance. And Mordecai wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Now, Mordecai's got a position there, and that makes Haman even madder.
Oh, yeah.
And so let's go to Esther 6. We're going to skip across here. We're going to get into the time where Haman is going to meet his righteous judgment. Esther 6, 10 through 14.
Then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so for Mordecai, the Jew, who sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done for the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai is of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared.
Now, Esther prepared this banquet to tell the king what Haman planned to do. She actually had two of them. She had one, and she kind of baited the king a little bit to come back the next night, so she had the second one where she actually told him what was going to happen and how Haman had tricked the king. And the king got really mad, and excuse me, and he went out in the garden to kind of walk off the mad. And while he's gone, Haman goes over and falls on the couch that the queen is on to beg for his life. But the king walks in and sees him on the couch and thinks he's trying to rape Esther, and immediately has him taken out and hung on Mordecai's gallows. Now, after that, Esther and Mordecai are allowed to put another decree in place. The king has made a decree, and it can't be withdrawn. So Esther and Mordecai set it up with a new decree so that the Jews could defend themselves. And so when the day came over here in December, where all these people had got this proclamation from Haman and started to go get to the Jews defended themselves, and they killed 75,000 men in this huge empire. How would you like to be king and lose 75,000 taxpayers? 75,000 workers. This would never have been done without God's intervention. Now, why are we having a lesson like this when we're having lessons on Moses and Abraham and Isaac and David and Jonathan? To prove to you that you can be a pretty intelligent person, you can have a lot of position and authority like Haman did, and if you're not knowledgeable about God's laws, if you're not a Christian and have taken Christ your Lord and Savior, you are not really going to be putting the interest of the empire and the king first. You're going to put in your own interest first. Mm-hmm. We not see this in politics today in this nation. It is quite interesting that Haman was absolutely consumed with hate for Mordecai and the Jews. Knowing his background, knowing his heritage, knowing his genetics, you can see why.
Sure.
The Jewish nation was to destroy the Amalekites. Now Haman the Amalekite, the Agite, has a chance to kill the Jews, and he's going to take it. And he's going to connive and lie and twist the truth to accomplish his goal, and he got his just reward.
Yes, he did.
Understand that Esther is the one that directed Mordecai to do what he did. 10 sons of Haman, hang them all.
Yeah.
All of these people that have come against the Jews, destroy them. Little, meek, mild, beautiful Esther. She was in charge of this whole process.
Yep.
God put her, as Mordecai had told her, maybe God has put you in this place for just such a time as this. And that's why this Purim is celebrated every year in the Jewish nation, and has been since the time of the Maccabees. Now, the Maccabean revolt was 400 years before Christ, and they were still celebrating it in the New Testament at the time of Christ. They sure were. They were also celebrating the Festival of Lights, where the Maccabees went back in and lit the menorahs in the temple and reestablished temple worship in the wintertime. This festival is held in the spring, in March-April time frame. So, did you learn anything today, Brenda?
Yes, I did.
What about those little three-pointed? You know what they're called?
No.
Hamantush.
Oh.
They're called Hamantush, and they represent the downfall of Haman. Okay. When you eat these little three-pointed pastries, you're celebrating the downfall of Haman, who intended to destroy the Jewish nation.
Well, I did learn that. And just as a coincidence, you know, we've been doing Bible studies for many years, and at the bottom I would write the date. We studied this on August 15th, 2010.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's what today is.
Yeah.
How about that?
Except it's 24 instead of 10.
14 years ago.
14 years ago.
Yep. Well, that's pretty much the lesson that I have, Brenda. I want you to understand. I want to read one more verse, which is Proverbs 16:18.
Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall.
Boy, is that not the case.
It is.
Over
Absolutely.
and over in the Bible, over and over in life. I think of, you could tell story after story after story of this very event. When you fail to give God His respect, understand that God is in charge of everything, and you begin to think you can control what happens, and you're going to make a difference in the history of the world by doing this, this, and this, you're going to be badly disappointed. See you next week.